Coming up on Arirang News, President Yoon Suk-yeol carries out a major shakeup of the top office, creating a new post, a Chief of Staff for Policy, and replacing all his senior secretaries in hopes of boosting his policy drive. South Korea's central bank keeps its key interest rate steady for the 7th consecutive meeting at 3.5%, maintaining it high to tame inflation while cutting the country's economic growth outlook for next year. Israel and Hamas agreed to extend their temporary ceasefire by an additional day, just minutes before the truce was set to expire, extending it to a 7th day, allowing the release of more hostages and Palestinian prisoners. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We start with a major reshuffle today at the top office. President Yoon Suk-yeol has created a new post and replaced all 5 of his senior secretaries for a stronger push of key policy agenda. Our top office correspondent Kim Do-yeon leads us off.
President Yoon Suk-yeol on Friday launched a new group for policy planning that will report directly to him as part of efforts to strengthen his policy drive. According to the announcement on Thursday morning, current Senior Secretary for Policy Planning Lee Jong-seok will be promoted to director of the group and will oversee work directly under the president.
The establishment of the Director of Policy position is to strengthen the coordination and consultation functions with the cabinet and the party, to accelerate the implementation of policies, and to more closely monitor economic policies in order to look after the livelihoods of the people.
Previously, only the Chief of Staff and the National Security Office worked directly under the president, with the Chief of Staff overseeing policy planning. The Director of Policy will be in charge of Senior Secretaries for Economic and Social Affairs, formerly under the Chief of Staff, as well as the soon-to-be-created Senior Secretary for Science and Technology. He will also be looked at as a level of minister.
Current economic indicators show recovery, but people are still facing difficulties. I'll prioritize taming inflation and use all available policies to do so.
This new office, while new for this administration, has been around under previous presidents. In fact, it was a role that President Yoon scrapped as he took office to minimize the size of the top office, but the revival shows President Yoon is motivated to put more effort into pushing policies harder. On top of this, President Yoon has new senior secretaries for all 5 remaining senior secretary positions who will start their roles next Monday. For public relations, former presidential spokesperson Lee Jong-seok has been promoted. For political affairs is also a promotion as Han Ho-seok, former secretary for state affairs monitoring, will take on the role. For civil and social agenda, Hwang Sang-moo, the former main anchor for Korea Broadcast Systems News, has been named. For economic affairs, Park Chun-seok and Chang Sang-yoon for social policy. As the new appointees briefly addressed the media, they all acknowledged that the situation is hard, whether it's social division or economic hardships. And as next year will bring President Yoon's 3rd year in office, while the country next April will vote for its National Assembly members, the new appointments will have a lot to get done right away. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The National Assembly today approved the appointment of Justice Lee Jong-seok as Chief of the Constitutional Court, ending the 3-week-long vacancy. And led by the main opposition party, it also introduced a motion to remove the Chief of the Broadcasting Watchdog, Lee Dong-kwan. Our political correspondent Lee Si-woo explains what's behind this move and what it could mean.
During a plenary session on Thursday, the National Assembly gave its consent to the appointment of Lee Jong-seok, a current justice on the Constitutional Court of Korea, as the top court's new chief. The consent for appointment passed with 204 votes for, 61 against, and 26 abstentions among the 291 lawmakers present. Lee has served on the 9-member Constitutional Court since 2018. In addition, Democratic Party-led motions to impeach Korea Communications Commission chairperson Lee Dong-kwan and 2 prosecutors seeking their removal from their posts were submitted to the Assembly. Some 168 lawmakers supported the motion to impeach Lee, citing violations of the law as the reason, emphasizing that he made 29 rulings with just another committee member.
He violated the purpose of the Commission and broadcasting laws enacted to ensure the independence and neutrality of the Korea Communications Commission.
Meanwhile, the ruling People Power Party objected to the impeachment motion.
None of the reasons for the impeachment of the chairperson of the Korea Communications Commission can be seen as a violation of the law or serious enough to justify the dismissal.
The motions to impeach must go through secret ballots between 24 and 72 hours after their submission. The main opposition, DP, is aiming to conduct voting on Friday. However, the ruling PPP is planning an overnight protest. The motion requires majority approval from current members of the Assembly, where the DP has a supermajority of 168 seats against the PPP's 111 out of the 298 total. If the motion passes, Lee will be suspended from his duties immediately until a ruling is made by the Constitutional Court, essentially paralyzing the operations of the KCC, which currently has only 2 decision-making members, Lee and his deputy, out of 5 possible. Some of the imminent pending issues at the KCC are the reauthorization of broadcasting stations' licenses that are due to expire and finalizing penalties against Google for forced in-app purchases. Lee Si-hu, Arirang News.
And President Yoon has also approved the designation of Lee Jong-seok as the Constitutional Court chief, filling the 21-day vacancy following the retirement of his predecessor, Yoon. The Finance Ministry today convened its 3rd State Policy Review meeting to gather public opinion on government policies affecting people's livelihoods. Presided over by Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho, 50 regular citizens took part, including victims of housing lease fraud and franchise business owners. They highlighted concerns about challenges and inconveniences they face in everyday life, such as transportation, housing lease fraud, childcare, and heating expenses. Justice Minister Han Dong-hoon, Interior Minister Lee Sang-min, and other ministers and related officials also participated to respond to audience questions and outline directions for future policies. The Bank of Korea has decided to keep its key interest rate steady for the 7th consecutive time at 3.5%, having reflected the latest on inflation. And it cut the growth outlook for next year to a little over 2%. Our economics correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
South Korea's central bank has again kept its key interest rate unchanged at 3.5% as widely expected. The decision was announced on Thursday following a Monetary Policy Committee meeting.
Despite the higher-than-expected inflation growth, a slowdown is anticipated. Considering the impact of the prolonged monetary tightening of the U.S. Fed and rising external uncertainty, including geopolitical risks, we have decided to keep a tightened monetary policy. The Board of Governors voted unanimously to maintain the current tightening stance.
For a 7th straight meeting, the Bank of Korea has decided to freeze the rate. The base rate has been held at 3.5% since February, following 10 consecutive rate hikes to tame inflation beginning in August 2021. Analysts say the central bank sees no need to raise the key interest rate solely to address soaring household debt, as it could further weaken consumer spending and investment. Meanwhile, the BOK on Thursday maintained its economic growth outlook for this year at 1.4%, while it slashed the outlook for next year by 0.1 of a percentage point to 2.1% from the previous projection in August.
Exports have been improving lately, but it'd be difficult to expect a significant increase. Domestic demand is sluggish as well. These factors led to the BOK and the IMF lowering their outlooks for next year's economic growth. Small businesses and the self-employed are facing challenges. In this regard, the government needs to prioritize the economy with relevant policies.
Consumer price growth is expected to be at 3.6% this year, up from its previous forecast of 3.5%. The BOK also raised the figure for next year to 2.6% from 2.4%. Inflation slowed during the first half of this year but rebounded in August, and the increase lasted until last month to 3.8%, the highest in 7 months due to higher oil costs and rising prices for some agricultural goods. The BOK governor said during a press conference that a committee member who had previously suggested the possibility of rate cuts withdrew that statement during Thursday's meeting amid a growing necessity to tame inflation. The Bank of Korea said that it will maintain high interest rates for a sufficiently long period until it's confident that consumer price inflation will slow to the target level of 2%, emphasizing that it is too early to consider rate cuts. 신하영, Arirang News.
All three indices showing the nation's industrial activities, output, spending, and investment saw a drop in October. The manufacturing sector took a notable hit as chip production fell by nearly 12%. Our An Sung-jin reports.
South Korea's overall industrial production for October saw the highest on-month fall since April 2020. According to Statistics Korea on Thursday, an on-month decrease of 3.4% in the manufacturing sector pulled down the country's overall output by 1.6%. The dip in manufacturing production is largely attributed to a sluggish semiconductor output, which fell by 11.4%. This contrasts with a rebound in August and September, when both saw an on-month increase of nearly 14%. An official from Statistics Korea said the dip is due to greater chip production recorded at the end of the third quarter.
As exports increase, they tend to increase at the end of the quarter, and due to the base effect, the beginning of the next quarter tends to see a decrease. Especially with shipments in the semiconductor industry concentrated at the end of the quarter, the difference seems to be a bit more noticeable this time.
The expert also said the temporary holiday in October meant fewer working days, which also affected production, adding that despite lower production volume, as prices for memory chips rose, the industry is recovering. Alongside industrial output, production and facility investment all saw a drop, while food and beverage consumption was also down due to the base effect from September's Chuseok holiday. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Shifting gears, the government has announced a series of measures regarding foreign workers in South Korea. The most notable change was an increase in the E9 visa quota and enabling restaurants to hire people with these visas. Our Moon Hae-ryun has more.
The government announced a pilot project to expand the eligible E9 visa employment sectors to tackle the labor shortage crisis in local industries. The E9 visa is a work visa for foreign nationals to carry out what's regarded as non-professional work and allows them to work in the manufacturing, construction, agriculture, fishery and service sectors. The government has increased the annual quota for E9 visa holders to 165,000 for 2024. And starting from April and July, they can work in dining, mining and forestry. However, in the dining industry, only Korean food restaurants can hire E9 visa holders and are subject to specific requirements. Restaurants with under 5 employees must have been operating for over 7 years, while those with more than 5 workers need at least 5 years in business. These measures come as the aging population, low birth rate and the COVID-19 pandemic have led to severe short-staffing.
It's been quite a while now since we first started seeing labor shortages in this industry. You could even go so far as to say the job market has collapsed. This new government policy will be extremely helpful.
According to data released by Statistics Korea, the labor shortage in the dining industry has increased more than 5-fold over the past 3 years. Earlier this year, the government expanded the H2 visa job sectors to include the entire restaurant industry. Additionally, working hours for international students with D2 visas were extended, allowing them to take on part-time weekday jobs. But as the above visa holders aren't really looking for work in the food service industry, expanding the hiring pool to E9 visa holders is expected to help rejuvenate the job market. Some are concerned about what this could mean for domestic workers, but restrictions are in place to protect them. Restaurants with fewer than 5 employees are limited to hiring 1 E9 visa holder, and those with more than 5 up to 2. Others feel that this isn't enough and that more industries need to be included, such as the accommodation sector.
Business is back to normal for hotels, but it's been difficult to hire staff that we cut down on during the pandemic.
The government will review the situation next month to address the increasing demand for foreign labor in the accommodation industry. A dedicated task force has also been established, indicating that more changes are on the horizon. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Over in Gaza, Israel and Hamas agreed to extend their truce one day more at the very last minute. Hostages had been released up until the 6th day of the ceasefire, and due to the extension, more captives are anticipated to be freed. Our Park Gun-woo with the latest.
Just 10 minutes before its expiration, Israel and Hamas agreed to extend their truce in the Gaza Strip under the same previous conditions for another extra day. The Israeli Prime Minister's office said on Thursday that the truce will continue as Israel was given a new list of women and minors for potential release beforehand, though not mentioning an exact number. Israel had agreed to extend the truce by 1 day for every 10 living hostages released, and noted it would resume fighting if that condition was not met. Meanwhile, Qatar, one of the negotiators between Israel and Hamas, also confirmed the extension in a statement made by its foreign ministry on Thursday. The ministry added that negotiations continue in hope of reaching a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. Thanks to continuous efforts by these mediators, including Qatar, Egypt, and the US, more captives are set to be released and more humanitarian aid convoys are scheduled to enter Gaza. Just before the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas was due to expire at 7 a.m. on Thursday local time, 16 hostages were released by Hamas, including 10 Israelis, 4 Thai nationals, and 2 Russians. They were handed over to the Red Cross late Wednesday on the 6th day of the truce and were taken to 5 different hospitals in Israel. In exchange, Israel also released 30 Palestinians, mostly women and minors. Over the first 5 days of the ceasefire, which began last Friday, Hamas released 81 hostages and Israel freed 180 Palestinians from prison, mainly women and minors. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
South Korea's Ministry of National Defense says it would be desirable for Seoul to also nullify the 2018 Inter-Korea Military Agreement. A ministry spokesperson told reporters on Thursday that since Pyongyang announced a virtual termination of the agreement last week and is blatantly restoring military options, the South Korean military will take countermeasures to protect its people. Last week, after the government announced a partial suspension of the 2018 Inter-Korean Military Agreement on a clause regarding aerial reconnaissance, Pyongyang announced a virtual termination of the agreement. The U.S. has sanctioned a cryptocurrency mixer accused of laundering money for North Korea. This is Washington's latest efforts to cut Pyongyang's cyber activities used for funding its weapons programs. Lee Seung-jae reports.
The U.S. Department of Treasury on Wednesday sanctioned Sinbad.io, a virtual currency mixer used by North Korean hacking group Lazarus Group, adding them to its Office of Foreign Assets Control sanctions list. The department added that the cryptocurrency mixer processed millions of dollars worth of virtual currency that the hacking group gained from its heists. Crypto mixing services improve the anonymity of transactions and are used by criminals to make funds harder to trace. The sanctions comes as the UN panel of experts on UN Security Council sanctions against the North said that Sinbad had laundered close to $100 million in Bitcoin for the Lazarus Group. The panel also explained that through its hacking group, North Korea was able to steal some $1.7 billion in cryptocurrency last year. The fresh sanction against the cryptocurrency mixer also comes as Pyongyang launched a space rocket last week to put a military reconnaissance satellite into orbit. However, both Seoul and Washington have been stepping up efforts to stop the regime's cryptocurrency theft and other cyber crimes as they can fund their weapons programs. The Treasury Department noted that Lazarus Group has operated for more than 10 years and is believed to have stolen over $2 billion worth of digital assets across multiple thefts. Lazarus Group was previously sanctioned by Washington in 2019 as a state-sponsored cyber hacking group of the North. Lee Jong-seok, Arirang News.
Former U.S. National Security Advisor and Secretary of State Henry Kissinger died on Wednesday local time at the age of 100. Kissinger served as the Secretary of State during the Nixon and Ford administrations in the 1960s and 70s. Apart from saying he died at his home in Connecticut, no further information concerning the circumstances was given by his geopolitical consulting firm, Kissinger Associates. A major figure in U.S. foreign policy, Kissinger laid the groundwork for U.S. and China relations and promoted détente with the Soviet Union during the Cold War, receiving the Nobel Peace Prize in 1973. In 1975, he proposed the four-party talks on the Korean Peninsula involving South and North Korea, the U.S. and China. The Cultural Heritage Administration has formally submitted the Jeju 4-3 archives to UNESCO to be inscribed as a UNESCO Memory of the World. The archives include records of victims' trials and U.S. military documents related to the April 3, 1948 incident on Jeju Island. The incident was a culmination of civilian protests against UN-led elections in the southern part of Korea under U.S. military rule. The committee announced on Thursday that it'll also submit documents showing where both the public and the government collaborated to rebuild the devastated southern part of the peninsula following the Korean War fought from 1950 to 1953. If successful, each is expected to be inscribed as a UNESCO Memory of the World in 2025. To K-pop news. The debut single titled 7 by BTS member Jungkook is one of the most streamed songs this year globally. According to Spotify's year-end Wrapped report released on Wednesday, Jungkook ranked 4th in its chart of the top 10 songs globally. He sits just behind Miley Cyrus, SZA, and Harry Styles. Jungkook actually topped other rankings in the report, including the global top K-pop songs of the year with his debut single as a solo artist and the global top K-pop artist of the year as a group with BTS.
As the cold wave warning in Gyeonggi-do, Gangwon-do, and Gyeongsang-do provinces continues, the Arctic cold has brought the coldest day of the season so far. This extreme cold will ease a little bit from today, but the frigid weather will continue to be below the seasonal norms until the end of the week. Snow clouds have formed in the West Sea area as the Arctic cold flowed in. These snow clouds will affect the West Coast until tomorrow. With a heavy snowfall watch issued, up to 10 centimeters of snow are in the forecast on the West Coast and up to 15 for mountainous regions of Jeju Island. The snow on the West Coast will mostly stop tomorrow afternoon. Due to freezing snow at sub-zero temperatures, extra caution is necessary on very slippery roads. Morning temperatures will stay in minus figures nationwide. Chuncheon will be ice cold at minus 10 degrees Celsius. Daily highs in Seoul and Chuncheon will get up to 3, Busan 9 degrees. The weather will be mostly sunny on the weekend, taking the cold away. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that is all for this newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 10 p.m. with our AI headline news. Good night.